If the bombs do come, our way of life will endure.
Greetings Fallout fans, I'm Ian Higton and this is Base Building for Beginners, the Fallout 76 edition. Building a base in Fallout 76 can be pretty overwhelming at first, thanks to the sheer volume of craftable items in your camp menu and just how incredibly fiddly it all can be. It also works a little differently to base building in Fallout 4, so whether you're completely new to base building in Fallout games, or you've done a bit of it in Fallout 4 and just want a refresher course to help you get up to speed on all the changes, here are some handy tips that should help you set up some incredible camps in Fallout 76. Step 1. Choosing a plot of land. In Fallout 4, bases could only be built in specific areas or settlements. These areas housed workshops that allowed you to enter a special menu to scrap junk and craft and place items. In Fallout 76, however, workshops don't exist. Instead, you have something called a camp, which is basically a portable workshop that can be carried with you and placed wherever you like. All you need to do is bring up your Pip-Boy, select Move Camp, and you can then pop your camp down onto the ground, as long as the plot of land you're standing on meets a few requirements. First up, the area you choose cannot be too close to an existing location. If this is the case, your camp will be highlighted red and you will not be able to place it on the ground. Heading away from built-up areas and choosing a spot in the wilderness is your best bet for a viable location, but if you're planning on building something big, it's within your best interests to find somewhere flat to build, like, for instance, the bed of this old dried-up lake. The reason for choosing flat land is simple. Fallout 76 can be really fussy and quite glitchy when it comes to placing objects on uneven ground, or in areas with lots of rocks and trees. It's not so bad if you're just plonking a stove or a crafting bench down willy-nilly, but if you're trying to build a huge fortress on a slope, for instance, object placement can get rather frustrating, as you'll often be told items are floating or are blocked by something when visibly they aren't. So the flatter and clearer the plot of land, the better for epic builds. Step 2. Perimeter and budget. One of the first things you'll notice once you've placed your camp, if you've played Fallout 4 before, is that the area for base building is much smaller in Fallout 76. The perimeter of your construction zone is marked in green, and anything you want to build must be placed within this area. If you venture out of it in build mode, you'll see the perimeter wall turn red, and item placement will be impossible. It's also worth pointing out that with a smaller build area comes a smaller budget. This 2-story house here is almost at maximum budget, which means I won't be able to place many more items, even though it's only sparsely decorated. The reason for this is the turrets I've placed outside. As I remove them, you can see the budget drops massively, so bear in mind you will need to sacrifice defense if you want to build something elaborate in the space you have available to you. Step 3. Gathering materials. In Fallout 4, initial base building was pretty easy because you could gather a load of crafting materials simply by scrapping most of the junk in Sanctuary. Unfortunately, you don't have this option when you place a camp in Fallout 76, so getting your hands on the components needed to build a large structure is going to be quite the grind. As you explore and partake in missions, you'll be able to gather plenty of junk, which you can then turn into scrap at any crafting bench you find. But the most important thing you'll need to look out for at the start, if you want to build a big base, is wood. Before you unlock the plans to build brick and metal walls, you'll only be able to make wooden structures, and as such, you'll regularly find yourself running out of wood. Thankfully, there are plenty of places to find it. You just need to know where to look. First up, some of the smaller pieces of junk will yield a bit of wood when you scrap them, but you can get much bigger loads if you keep your eyes peeled for wood piles like this one. They're often found near the walls of old shacks on the outskirts of towns, but once you've harvested the wood from them, you won't be able to do it again unless you load into a new world. Wandering around in the wilderness can also give you wood. Watch out for fallen trees and broken logs, which you can sometimes harvest for wood as well. Finally, if you've got plenty of caps on you, you can always visit a trading post or wandering merchant where you can always buy bulk building materials from the vendor. Thankfully, wood is relatively cheap, but it's still quite a lot of caps to put down for something you can literally find lying around on the floor.
Ammunition and gear.
Step 4. Construction. Now comes the fun part, building your very first base. Head to your chosen build site and place your camp on the ground. Select the camp and you'll see there are 26 main categories for construction, compared to the 8 that were in Fallout 4. These include floors, walls, crafting, and appliances. Each category contains many different items to build, but you'll notice that most things, like the brick walls here, can only be constructed if you've found the correct plans. Other items like turrets and traps require specific perks to build them as well, so this should be something to bear in mind when you're leveling up your character. Oh, and just quickly, when you do earn a plan, either by purchasing one or by completing a mission, don't forget to read it. Items will only become craftable once you've read those plans. It's not enough just to own them. Any plans you do own can be found and read in your Pip-Boy's Items Notes submenu. When it comes to putting structures together, you'll find it's pretty easy. The pieces snap together neatly, so as long as you have enough wood, constructing a basic square house like this one should be no problem at all. Unlike Fallout 4 though, you cannot choose from pre-built sections. Here you will have to place all the floors, walls and roofs independently, crafting each one as you go. The best thing to do to start is to place some foundations, which can be found in the floors menu. These sink into the floor, and just like other walls and floors, they snap together pretty nicely. A 2x2 foundation is enough for a starter build, as you're unlikely to have many components at the beginning. But at level 16, I find a 3x3 foundation normally gives me enough space to house all the crafting tables I need to keep my survivor happy. Once you've placed the foundations, the rest is up to your imagination. You can start to add walls, doors, and anything else you need to make your very own dream home in the Appalachian wasteland. Step 5. Editing objects. If you've placed an item that you don't really like and you want to remove it, there are 3 choices available to you. Just enter the camp's modify menu by pressing circle on the PS4 or B on the Xbox One, and then you can select the item or object you want to move and reposition. Or you can select the item with square on PS4 or X on Xbox One, and you can choose to scrap it or store it in the camp for use later down the line. If you don't want to reposition the item, I'd suggest storing it in the camp rather than scrapping it. If you scrap something, you'll get fewer components back from the item than were initially used to make it. If you store an item instead, it'll sit in your camp's stored menu, ready for use at another time, and this way you won't lose any valuable components. Placing objects exactly where you want them in Fallout 76 does have the ability to be really annoying though, thanks to the clumsy controls and the confusing interface, but thankfully there is a slightly easier way to move objects around, other than just looking at the approximate location where you want them to go. Simply hold down X on the PS4 or A on the Xbox One and you can move your items backwards and forwards and left and right with the left thumbstick, all whilst you stay stationary. You can also rotate the item with the L2 and R2 or LT and RT buttons, and you can even raise and lower them with L1 and R1 or LB and RB. This will make things slightly easier, but be warned, even simple things like this seem to be much more fiddly in Fallout 76 compared to Fallout 4. Unfortunately, unlike in Fallout 4, it's not possible to select and move multiple objects at once. You can only modify and edit one item at a time, which, believe me, is a real pain in the ass if you have a large structure to shift. Step 6. Making a blueprint. If you want to move your camp but don't want to rebuild it from scratch, you're going to need to make and store a blueprint. To do that, select your camp, switch to the Modify menu, and then point at a wall or the floor and press LB or L1 to select the whole structure. Doing this will not only select all the walls and floors, but also everything inside the interior of your base. If you want to add any items outside of your base to your blueprint, like this water pump here, just select it again with the LB or L1 button. But be warned, adding exterior items, especially sunken ones like this, makes it almost impossible to place the building in a new area. Once you've selected everything you need, you can then create a blueprint for that structure by pressing square or X before finally giving it a fancy name. Any blueprints you do make will then be stored in the blueprint section of the camp's crafting menu, so go there if you want to find and then place one of your existing blueprints. Step 7. Move your camp at your peril. So remember in point 1 when I told you to pick flat land to build on? The real reason for choosing flat land is simple. Moving large bases in Fallout 76 is a pain in the ass, and it hardly ever works, which is a bit crap considering it was a main selling point of the game. At least on flat land you have a better chance of pulling it off though. Try to move something built on a slope to somewhere that's flat or vice versa, and you'll just end up having to scrap the blueprint entirely and start your build all over again, because the game just won't be able to clip your base to the map. That's not as bad as it might sound though. You won't lose anything you've worked hard to scavenge if you scrap a blueprint. All the items you've crafted previously will be moved to the storage menu in the camp, but still, starting over is aggravating AF. I've tried and failed multiple times to move big bases that I've built, and almost every time it's been unsuccessful. Honestly, I think I managed to get it to work once in about 10 times of trying. Take Butt's house here for instance. It was fine before I made it into a blueprint, but now when I tried to place it in approximately the same area where I built it, it says it's floating, even though it looks visibly fine. Then when the structure goes green, which means it should be placeable, it then says there's no support and it won't let me place it down either. That means I either need to go wandering and find another plot of land to try placing it down again, or I just scrap the blueprint altogether and start from scratch. However you look at it, it's a pain in the arse, so this final tip should probably have been called "Don't get too attached to your base," because if it's more intricate than just a few blocks, as soon as you move your camp, chances are you'll have lost it for good.
Wouldn't it be nice if we were older and we wouldn't have to wait so long?
Right, so that's pretty much the basics of base building right there. Knowing all this should give you a good foundation to work from as you experiment with more complicated builds in Fallout 76. Thanks for watching this tutorial. If you found it helpful, feel free to give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe to Eurogamer for more Fallout 76 videos in the near future, including some advanced base building tutorials if this one proves popular. Goodbye and good building.
Yeah, hold each other.